Namaskar and good morning to all of you. What I plan to discuss arises from the fact that 85% of modern diseases are preventable. Only 15% we don't really know how to stop. And this includes every conceivable disease.
But a few words about yourself first. Yeah, we want your introduction.
Why would you? You will waste a lot of time. That you can do afterwards. That you can do afterwards also. No?
Well, basically I am a upasaka of learning, and I see myself as a conduit between the science and people. Not even patients, people, because we are all patients in some sense. So what I have taken to doing is simply bring the practical benefits of various kinds of medical and health insights in a usable form to the people. This is, I think, who I am. Is it good enough? So 85% of all diseases, including heart disease, cancers, are preventable. Only 15% we don't know how to stem. They are beyond our reach. So while healthcare, medical care is certainly required for this 15%, it looks like the fact that medical care is available has also kind of made disease affordable to modern human beings. So I will look into the factors that enables us to understand. So the first part will be exploration. The second part will be a bit of analytics, and I will come up with a part of the synthesis and leave you to build on the rest of the synthesis for yourself. Diseases arise not because they are the natural course of events. The state of health or of illness is determined by a complex interplay of 5 major factors: genetic, environmental, nutritional, physiological, that is how the body behaves, and psychological factors. In modern medical science, it is customary to do studies with a control group of human beings and an experimental group of human beings and extrapolate the results. But in some of these explorations, what I have chosen is to look at human beings vis-a-vis the other animals in nature, because I believe this affords a lot of new insight and learning. So the backdrop of this is simple. It would be largely familiar to you. Homo sapiens has been on Earth for about 500,000 years. We are not the only human species to have lived on this Earth. There were many who lived and became extinct. And at one point of time, we have shared the Earth and time with another human species, the Neanderthals, which is estimated to have become extinct as recently as about 12,000 years ago. At this point of time, we are the only surviving human species. A vast part of this 500,000 years We have lived in the jungles in close proximity to nature as foragers, hunter-gatherers, subsisting on a diet of herbs, berries, and occasionally small meats. And there is fossil evidence that at this span of time, human beings were refreshingly free from every conceivable modern disease. I quote from Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli evolutionary historian. It's a simple book, Sapiens, hugely insightful. So these humans were not only long-lived, they were physically active even beyond the age of 100, and their greatest risk was infant mortality. So if individuals survived, they could anticipate a very good and high-quality lifespan. And aging, like in today's wild animals, did not span a very long length of time. It was accelerated aging confined to the last few weeks or at most last few months of life. Until then, individuals were completely active. They could run, climb trees and everything. They didn't have heart disease. They didn't have malignancies. They didn't have degenerative skeletal-muscular problems. In fact, none of the modern diseases, is there any evidence in the fossils? This is an important insight that we can glean and try to look at what is happening with ourselves. So to go back to the point that I made, the 5 major factors, genetic, environmental, nutritional, physiological and psychological factors. Genes don't imply a determined outcome. Genes don't say that this and this is going to happen to me. The genes simply represent a collection of information bits, and most of them remain as potentials or tendencies. And there is a part of the gene that is called the epigene, and it is the epigene which switches on gene expression. So we have genes pertaining to constructing a human system and running it, the physiological processes, everything is there. We also have genes pertaining to healing and recovery. We have genes pertaining to some ailments also, like I might have inherited a diabetes or an asthma tendency. Now if I can get proactive, which would mean that I learn and start doing the right things with my life, then the epigene that exists, it takes its signals from the internal environment of the body. The internal environment of the body is fluctuating, it is variable, but in each individual's, it bears a time-bound signature as to how the fluctuations have been happening. So micro fluctuations will depend upon what you have eaten, when you have eaten, how much water you have consumed, whether you have slept, whether you have moved the body around, exercised, recovered, slept well. So arising from what we are doing with ourselves, every possible input and output, there is an internal environment of the body, and that provides the cue for the epigene to decide what to do. So if I have inherited a diabetic tendency, I manage my weight, eat healthy, whatever that means, exercise adequately, recover well, sleep properly, manage my mental stresses. Then I am creating an internal environment by which the epigene potentially would decide not to switch on the diabetic gene expression. In other words, I would be carrying the gene, but it will not express the disease. if and when that happens, my next generation will need to struggle less in order to prevent the disease. And if they do succeed, the succeeding generations will have it much easier. So at some point of time it will happen that virtually without doing anything, the disease will stop expressing. This is what is called an epigenetic change. And this is very strongly anchored in today's understanding of genetics. So this epigenetic change means the genes remain intact, the genome remains intact. What changes strongly is their modality of expression, which is far more than good enough for us. Point of fact, it looks plausible if we look into the question of how did we come to inherit these kind of diseases which don't exist in the animal kingdom. So if we are just going to run the scenario in reverse, that is how we happen to have inherited all these ailments, by making unknown errors somewhere. Most of these errors are not made by individuals, perhaps not even by communities, may not even be by age, but these errors have been accumulated over long spans of evolutionary time. And one such, which is probably a turning point marker, happened between 10 to 15,000 years ago. For nigh upon 500,000 years we were living in proximity to nature. Human populations being small, nature being verdant, there was no issues. An accident happened, which was one of the first accidents in the history of human beings. That was the agricultural revolution. So some intelligent, or we don't know whether to call them smart, they decided to capture our food sources and tame it. So instead of walking into the jungles in order to forage, they figured out how these grains grew, planted them, watered them, manured it, built a cottage next to it. This changed the entire scenario of our life. And it is from this point onwards that the history of human diseases began. And the explanation for this history of human diseases is an amazing fact in nature, that a human being, a system like this, has about 100 trillion cells, out of which only 10 trillion cells belong to my body. 90 trillion cells in my system are actually the microbes in my intestines. The skin alone has about 200 billion microbes. And to get a sense of this number, 200 billion sheets of paper would stack up 6,000 miles high. And we have 90 trillion microbes of every kind in the gut. And when we switched over from herbs, berries, occasional small meats, which was consumed raw or uncooked, to a diet of grains, dairy products, poultry and other meats, before anybody could have a notion of such a thing as microbes in the gut, the whole scenario changed. So much so that we don't even have a benchmark for what was deemed to be the norm. And we have been struggling to adapt for this long time, 10 to 15,000 years. And the march of history being inexorable, we were met with another historical accident about 400 years ago. That's the Industrial Revolution, which took away the demands on the physical aspect of our being. We don't need to work our bodies. And challenges on the mind mounted. Nobody planned this, it was an accident. So by default, we came to institute a system of education which is basically training in troubleshooting, identification and solving of problems. So we had the task of designing newer and efficient machines, putting together the organizations required to run them. So we came to create and institute a system of education which aims at training the intellectual part of the mind to solve problems. Consequently, vast other reaches of the human personality, psychic personality, have kind of come to be ignored. So in one sense, modern human beings have come into, and we are operating from a tremendous state of internal imbalance, very far removed from nature. And the Industrial Revolution, obviously, people migrated into towns, cities, and so forth. The overcrowding started certain diseases which were not understood those days. Thousands and millions of people died until Louis Pasteur et al. Proposed that there are germs causing this disease and it can be defeated by doing this and this. So they generated antiseptics, antibiotics, and ill-advisedly seem to have overused this. So the first whammy happened, the agrarian revolution. We lost what was our natural microbes. The technical name for this is microbiome. And before the adaptation could even go to any length, this was a double whammy. Whatever few friends had survived, they were also truncated. So while the infectious diseases seem to have come under control, the first part of the 20th century, 1900 onwards, saw the emergence of a peculiar class of diseases which were not infectious diseases, the non-communicable diseases, obesity, diabetes, cholesterol problems, various kinds of arthritis, autoimmune disease. So just like the people of yore struggled with the infectious diseases not knowing what it was, we are kind of struggling with these new diseases not knowing what it was, because you can easily collect cholera and tuberculosis to germs notionally, but it is not so easy to connect obesity or diabetes or something like this to germs. But point of fact, there seems to be an extraordinarily strong connection. Not in the sense that a germ is causing diabetes, but it is very clear that in all these modern diseases, no matter what they are, there is a major disturbance in the composition and function of the gut microbes. So microbes which should be there are probably less in number, have disappeared. Microbes which should not be there have taken over. The whole functionality is altered because these microbes are active. They are living. They are waging a war, helping one another, creating their own metabolites, end products as they live. And these end products, it is now clear in modern medical science, are a way for these microbes to carry on a continuing conversation with our own nervous system. Now science is very clear. Next to the brain, the richest network of nerve endings you can find is in the intestines. And this microbiome is an extraordinarily amazing thing. For one, each person's microbiome is as unique as your fingerprint. No one else before now and no one else at a later point of time is going to have an exact replica. And second point is, through the course of life, month to month, year to year, your microbiome is changing. Even so, at no point of time does it resemble anybody else's, nor your own at another point of time. So this is a second order of infinity. This much science is very clear. And obviously it has an important bearing on what we need to know, what we need to learn. This science is inadequate. It is just in its starting phases. And what little you know is precious, and even so it is significantly affected. So these 5 factors: genetic, environmental, nutritional, physiological and psychological factors. Let's look at the last first, psychological factors. Human beings are fundamentally creatures of emotion, like all the mammals. And our thinking is actually only an add-on. Anything that happens to us fundamentally happens at an emotional level. Therefore, imbalances are bound to be very profound and fundamental. And the mind has a more powerful influence on body functioning than we normally accept. In other words, the influence of the mind on the body is exceedingly powerful. And one of the ways that the mind can adversely impact functioning of the body is this phenomena of stress. Stress has been defined as a response pattern whose function is to prepare the body to cope with the demanding situation. So when things are fine, all the internal functions are going on at uniform key. If I sense a demanding situation, the body has got a reserve potential to alter its inner functionings in order to adapt and cope with this scenario. And the stress mechanism evolved from the times when we were living in the jungles, when stresses were essentially physical. Wild animal attacks, enemy attacks, and so forth. So we have evolved with the stress response being an adaptation for fight or flight. So the body basically prepares for running away or for fighting whenever we experience stress. The reason why stress has become a problem for human beings, while all the other creatures, they have stress but they are living healthfully. The reasons are twofold. One is the stressors have shifted from the physical to the mental domain. And another reason is there is a new stress piling on top of an old unresolved one. And there is a third piling on top of 2 old ones. So we are caught on an ascending ladder of stresses on a continuous basis. And to understand what happens inside the body in a stress reaction, it is very interesting. Dr. Hans Selye, who was the pioneer in stress research, his medical understanding of stress is very recent, 1965, University of Montreal. If we take an instance, it is illuminating because Dr. Hans Selye defined stress as the response pattern which prepares the body to cope with a demanding situation. And he qualified this response pattern with 3 adjectives. He found that it is non-specific, which means irrespective of the cause of stress, the body's response is always the same. So whether it is physical, mental, intellectual, emotional, the body doesn't differentiate. The same channels of response happen. The second is, he found that this response is phylogenetic, which means different individuals are differently responsive. Some are resilient, some are more sensitive, and so forth. So variations occur in individuals. And the third quality has been defined as conventional, by which, because of the complexity of our nervous system and a large memory and learning that is operating in human beings, the stress has taken on a new characteristic when compared to the other animals. The other animals have stress. The hunters and the hunted do experience stress, but only in the living situation. When a deer is being chased by a leopard, it has stress. A relaxed deer doesn't imagine an attack and get stressed, whereas we human beings can and we do. So this convention is set up wherein previous experiences are stored into quasi-independent neural loops. And the entire loop is ready to be activated at the first semblance of something that I remember from my earlier experience. So in other words, we respond to an actual demanding situation, and we respond in the same way to an inference, construction, imagination, perception, or dream. All of them produce the same effect. So in many ways for human beings, the mind itself has become a stress organ. So the reason why stress has become a problem is twofold. One is stressors have become mental, and stress has become chronic. Chronic mental stress is the problem. Otherwise, all the changes happening and reverting back is never any issue. The point is, it's not reversing back. So if we look at what happens to the body in a stress response, if a snake flits across my path, suddenly there is the start doing reflex. It has two components. There is an abrupt jump in the level of wakefulness, and there is an increase in muscle tension. The body has sensed a threat and is primed up to ward off this threat, increasing the muscle tension and elevating the wakefulness. And the energy mechanisms of the body are put at the disposal of the muscles and of the brain, which is doing the work and which is doing the coordination. So the stored glucose in the liver is pumped out into the bloodstream, elevating blood sugar levels to fuel the effort. And we tend to breathe faster when we are under stress to provide additional oxygen for the effort. And breathing in higher mammals is organized into three levels. One is abdominal breathing, another is chest breathing, the third possibility is shoulder breathing. Now the way you are breathing is actually an indication of your internal state. Young infants always breathe through the abdomen because they are naturally relaxed. In contrast, an athlete who has just participated in an event would recover by breathing through the chest. So stress of the demand has pushed the breathing from the first to the second level. And in an extreme case, a 100-meter sprinter would recover by breathing through the shoulders. Augmented reserve, third level, extreme stress. This point emerges as important because it affords a tool in managing stresses, which you can apply even in a minute or two. All you need to do is sit down, comfortably stretch your legs, close your eyes, watch your breathing, and then you can use your palms to monitor the abdomen movements. Ensure that you are breathing purely through the abdomen without allowing the chest to move for a little while, for a minute or so. Then end with a few rounds of slow, deep abdominal breathing. The corollary is when there is stress in the body, breathing shifts up into the higher lobes. And if you are able to get your breathing down into your abdomen, the neural system spontaneously relaxes. This is an important practical key. So in the course of your work, every 2-3 minutes that you get, you can meaningfully employ in order to practice this technique even in your chambers or in your chair. Closing your eyes, observing the breathing, monitoring the breathing using your palms. Slow, deep breathing. So that you start the process of cutting the ascending loop of stresses several times in the course of the day. So this is one technique that emerges from the understanding. Blood glucose is elevated, breathing is stimulated, the heart gets stimulated to breathe harder and beat harder and faster into a network of blood vessels in mental stress that will narrow down and constrict. There is about 65,000 miles of blood vessel in a human body, 100,000 kilometers. And the heart has the task of pumping blood into this network. And in mental stress, body is idle. Heart is trying to pump harder and faster. And the network of blood vessels is narrowing down and offering greater resistance This is pretty much like keeping the handbrakes on and pressing the accelerator. This is the scenario that happens in mental stress. We will look at what we could do about it. So these are priority channels which have to be and which are activated in order to cope with a demanding situation. To restore the balance, the body will slow down and down-regulate the non-priority functions. So digestion is down-regulated. Immune system is down-regulated. Gender functions are down-regulated. And it is not simply a question of down-regulation or up-regulation. It is much more complex than that, because all realities are in effect complex. For example, the digestive system from the mouth up to the end of the stomach is mostly under nerve control and a little bit under hormone control. From the end of the stomach down to the lower part, rectum, that is mostly under hormone control and less under nerve control. So there is a delicate interplay or interface between these two commands, which can get set or eat. Which is why digestion goes for a toss because of stress. Similarly, our immune system is not just fighting germs. The body is also producing abnormal cells in the course of its daily activities. And it's a part of the immune system's work to identify and scavenge these abnormal cells out of the body. If some of them survive, they can potentially grow into malignancies. And one important thing that happens in stress is, it is logical in the natural context. When facing wild animals and enemies, there is a chance that I can sustain a major injury. And nature has instituted speeding up of clotting when we are under stress. The point is, we are not facing physical stress with the exception of automobile accidents or riots or something. And even in mental stress, the same thing is happening because it's a non-specific response pattern. So this enhanced tendency of the blood to clot has major implications in modern lifestyle. And the most hidden and insidious part of this is, naturally, the human body doesn't have downtime for maintenance and repair. It has to happen while we are living in it. Until growth is complete, we have terrific results. Body is not breaking down a lot until 20, 25, 30. So need for repair and maintenance is very minimal. But once we cross 30, 35 and so on, breakdown processes start ascending. So repair processes have to keep pace with that. This is true from the physical, physiological to the cellular levels. So there is, and there has to be a consistent healing process in the body to keep up with what we are doing with ourselves. And this healing is also a part of the job of the immune system to regulate. And when we are under stress, then emergency activation becomes paramount and the body down-regulates the healing processes. In extreme stress, healing may be kept in abeyance because it doesn't want to worry about microbes or something when faced with a tiger. So when the stress becomes chronic and enduring, we tend to have problems in the long run. Therefore, we need a redefinition. Chronic mental stress is a state of internal imbalance. And this internal imbalance is characterized by arousal and or inhibition, just settled. Some functions are over-aroused, speeded up, certain functions are depressed. Any combination of the two. And not only this has set in, this is continuing, unrelieved. And the ostensible reason why this is happening is, we say, my internal state is in a state of imbalance because there is an external circumstance that is causing it. So we need to look at effective strategies in managing this internal scenario. One is if the stressors can be eliminated straightway. But in reality, most stressors cannot be eliminated. See whether there is any opportunity to moderate the stressor, reduce the stress potential. But having done that also leaves a lot of stressors uncorrected. So the only way we need to do is re-equip the body, reorient it to be able to cope with what is happening. And one way of doing it is to enhance your internal reserve capacity of the body. And fortunately, this is very simple to achieve. We call this a stress inoculation. There are 3 kinds of exercise possible. One is muscle building with the resistances in body weight and so forth. It's good for the body. Improves the strength of the bones, preserves the muscles and everything. But it is not of much value in stress management. Another is flexibility training, bending, stretching, etc. This is also good for the body. It prevents the changes that happen with old age. But it's also of little value in stress management. The type of exercise that is most valuable in stress management is stamina building exercise. Any exercise in which your activity level is kept above normal for a given length of time. It could be walking, jogging, cycling, swimming, dancing, or using any of the cardiorespiratory machines in the gym. You can choose your mode. You can vary between all those. So considering the intensity of the activity that you are taking, you will have to decide upon a duration and a frequency. How long you have to do it and how frequently you have to do it. If you were to take brisk walking as an example, if you want to achieve stress inoculation, it is make the body a little more immune to stresses. When you start walking, start slowly for the first 5 minutes. Give the body a chance to warm up. Once the body warms up, achieve a comfortable speed. And this comfortable speed should be set between the limits of effectiveness on one hand. It should be fast enough to be effective. It should not be so fast as to be dangerous. So keep it between the margins of effectiveness and safety. So if walking were to be the instance, the necessary duration is something like 30 minutes. And the end, the last 5 minutes with cooling down, slowing down. So basically, exercise is also a form of stress. And when you undertake exercise, blood vessels start opening up. So this corresponds to release of the accelerator. So if and when the heart starts pounding harder, its output will be received without resistance, which is good for the body. This is one way it helps. The other way it helps is exercise being a form of stress. When you undertake exercise, your body releases the same stress hormones. But when you are doing it on a regular basis, your body is seeing these stress hormones. It will learn to switch it off faster. So that in the context of a situational stress in life, when there is a surge in these stress hormones, your body has learned to switch it off faster and immunize you to that. So this is how stress inoculation works. And it is advisable to conclude this walking for most of us professionals with an active yogic relaxation technique. Because my body is in a ground state, 30 minutes of walking has brought it to a stimulated state. When I complete my walking and just leave my body, plump down or lie down or whatever, it will start the process of recovering. So this process of recovering has got a momentum. At some point, the momentum tapers off and it will plateau at a certain position. During the stimulated state and before recovery can set in, if you do an active shavasana, composed of relaxing the muscles in the body, you can tighten up, feel and release various groups of muscles in the body. Observe the breathing, allow it to await, and engage in pure rhythmic abdominal breathing with normal depth, not a deep breathing. And then conclude with a few rounds of deep abdominal breathing. So you are using the higher level of your nervous system, awareness, to draw the process of recovery to a much deeper level. So over a period of time, if you go doing this, the ladder of ascending stresses that we are caught on can effectively be reversed. Bring it down. So these techniques that we do, Shavasana, Asana, Yoga, they actually are techniques by which we are endeavoring to learn a skill. So as we continue practicing, the skill becomes grounded in us, then our dependence on the technique reduces. You will not have to do a 40-minute Shavasana in order to accrue that much of relaxation. 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line. In 5 minutes or 6 minutes, you can recover as much. So this learning accruement process has to be started with practice. So stress inoculation and bring in some component of yoga. If you can undertake a structured learning of yoga, that would be even better. A handful of asanas, vyayamasanas, which is basically a structured way of relaxing the body. Also stimulating and inhibiting whatever spikes and contortions are there in the internal functions. Pranayama is actually a structured way of regulating the breath, harmonizing the breath. If these two foundations are primed up, then the third happens as a part of the flow, that is calming down of the mind. So this calming down of the mind is the crucial crux of yoga. The others are actually strategies in initiating this calming. Besides which, you can bring in a basket of strategies, situational coping strategies, corrections in attitude, when and where applicable, a humorous outlook which can diffuse the stress, bringing in or experiencing classical music, which has medically been established to have a tremendously beneficial effect upon the system. So all these can be brought in as effective strategies in stress management. This is the last part of it. Now going on to the physiological, the fourth one. Pardon me?
Would you write it down for us?
Oh yes, I will do. I'm sorry, I'm continuing to talk without writing. The five genetic, environmental, nutritional, physiological, and psychological factors.
So we've dealt with the psychological
Yeah,
factor.
we have dealt with the psychological factor largely. As far as the content of the session is concerned, I have not gone into any aspect of clinical psychiatry. I lack competence also. My forays into psychiatry, and it is there. I have a grinding in that, but I am not a professional in the domain. So some of my friends do that. When it comes to physiological, one or two important points have already been recounted. Exercise. Exercise and yoga are actually different. Exercise is muscle culturing, or by extension, it can be improving the functionality of your heart and lungs. Whereas yoga is oriented to nerve culturing. It is more about your central nervous system, your hormones, and indeed, by extension, our own personality. So the two are complementary to one another. They are not mutually exclusive. So common myths run, people who are doing one should not do the other. I don't buy that. It's meaningful to do both in the present context. A little bit of physical exercise to keep the body trim, and some yoga to keep the personality integrated, and they will find their own interface and find a little compartment of time for each. And another is sleep. Sleep, there are three components. One is sleep duration. Unfortunately, it is estimated that most urban modern humans are sleep deprived. So we are ourselves calling out how much sleep we need. 6 hours is enough, 5.5 hours is enough, 4 3/4 hours is enough. Actually, it is not. If you are chronically sleep deprived, the body adapts itself, prevents you from falling asleep, which doesn't really mean that you are not sleep deprived. So we don't know the clear symptomatology of sleep deprivation. Most sleep studies seem to indicate that the mean sleep requirement for human beings ranges between 7 to 9 hours, which we certainly are not.
We are not getting.
And sleep deprivation comes with a cascade of problems. For one, it is not the brain that rests in sleep, because many centers in the brain are known to become overactive when we sleep. So sleep is largely when the body is at rest. Our conscious functioning mind is at rest. But different layers of the brain are activated for many purposes which sleep science yet doesn't understand. So sleep, as far as science is concerned, is a closed book of which only the first few pages have been opened. But what we know is this. One is we require an adequate sleeping duration. The second thing, even more critical, is the sleep window. Assuming we take 6 hours as a benchmark, 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, 6 hours is not the same as 12 to 6. It's certainly not the same as 2 to 8. Because we are subject to circadian rhythms, the trigger being the sunlight basically. And if you are not synchronized to the circadian rhythms, sleep doesn't do you any good, because the sleep architecture tends to get disturbed. So this disturbance of sleep architecture is a point of major concern in today's health scenarios. Because that is not something that we can voluntarily influence. What we can voluntarily opt is, you can choose the duration, you can choose the window. But fortunately, provided we do this on a rhythmic basis, almost in every case, good sleep architecture follows as a consequence. If it doesn't, then in that case, it requires an estimation, it requires evaluation, and we need to see what to do about it. That is a rare case scenario, fortunately. But this is an important part. And also, sleeping, even with a weak light in the bedroom, is no-no. We are accustomed to it, except for very elderly people who have risk of falls and all that. So in order to save a larger disaster, that may be permissible. But if you are over-bodied, able-bodied, please sleep in complete dark. Because I have, in my mobile phone in the pocket, I have got many research reports that indicate with your eyes closed, you are not able to see it, but there is some weak light in the bedroom can be a trigger for many metabolic disorders, including diabetes. Point of fact, we came across one patient who was okay in many other ways, but she was sleeping with the full lights on. Severely diabetic, would not come under control. So these things are very important. They are not often brought
Sleeping
into
with the light on is also related to breast cancer.
Yes.
They've researched it.
See, there you are. So night and dark, ideally make it night and dark. And try to sleep your best. And this is an important part of this channel. Exercise we have already spoken about. Now coming to nutrition, I will dwell at length on this because this is one of the most...
There is one query. You have said that normal sleeping time should be 7 to 9 hours. So many people, you take our Prime Minister, the Chief Minister, they sleep only 4 hours.
I'm aware
They
of
seem
it.
to be healthy and very energetic. How is that?
One is, firstly, even so, they are alpaharis. They eat processed foods of the simplest order, and most of their energies come from fruits, vegetables, etc. This kind of thing. That will, for anybody, reduce sleeping requirement. So sleeping requirement will increase the heavier the foods that we eat, the more sleep we need. That is one part. Secondly, they are very grounded practitioners of yoga, and that yoga, pranayama and relaxation can potentially reduce your sleeping requirement. So in that case, their diet and lifestyle is working synergistically with this. And third thing is very powerful. They have a missionary zeal. So some part of their mind is overriding everything else. And still and all, I'm a little sad that I have pursued our PM to have gone through accelerated aging. He has undergone accelerated aging.
Accelerate.
Aging.
Yes, for the past 2 years.
But I have also realized that when your work mood is on, so some changes in the body, after that the body keep you energized and you...
Now let me explain this.
You get for very energy, full of energy, but the moment you go into the rest mode, then all that, the nagging behind of that rest and all, that also, suddenly that you feel a lot of load, you feel a lot of sadness once you stop working.
Let me put it into context. It is quite simple. There are two orders of hormones that are regulating it. One is the activating limb, corticotropes. The corticotropes elevate your energy levels and your performance levels without any reference to your basic body state. In other words, a flat tire riding on the tire and then riding on the rim. This is how the corticotropes achieve. When the corticotropes dominate, the healing hormones, the somatotropes, they are necessarily downregulated. So it is perfectly possible to remain energetic, euphoric, etc., while your body cells are consuming themselves. This is physiologically possible, drawing out of our reserves. So this is all potentially drawn out of our mind capabilities. Somebody has such a missionary goal that doesn't mind burning out for that. So these are extraordinary scenarios. So physiologically what I am saying holds. If we mean to conserve, remain healthy and all that, this is the fundamental. Okay, I'll go for it. Now coming to this nutrition.
सबसे मेरी this is the main
Yeah, this is the main, yes. I will take the maximum time about it. I wish to share with you a certain paradigm of exploration and understanding. At the outset, I will not come into the question of what to do, what not to do. That you can draw your own informed conclusions. Maybe I will help draw some lines of possibilities for you. First and foremost is, we know all these facts, but we don't live with these facts. Sun is the only source of energy on earth. And there are two kinds of creatures. Those that can use sunlight to produce food and those that cannot. Producers and consumers. We are obviously the consumers. This is one point. Second point is, in nature, there is no such thing that can be called as food. What exists is a wide spectrum of living creatures and whatever they produce. So the word food is a convention, and this convention refers to what is the substance that we call as food. If my body is in a state of balance, and after eating it, my body continues in a state of balance, I call it food and consume it. So out of the millions of varieties of stuff available in nature, by trial and error, we have learned to home in on very few as our food because the others can be adverse and toxic. So food is any substance that helps maintain an existing balance. This is a definition by convention. And toxin or poison is any substance that disturbs an existing balance. And medication or medicine is any substance that restores a disturbed balance. Once again, by convention, the word food conjures up a buffet table from salads to desserts. Poison, blue bottle with skull and crossbones. Medicine, amber bottle, shake well before use. But the point is, given the fact that our body is in a state of dynamic fluctuation, one and the same thing can work as food, medicine, or poison. For example, a glass of sweet fruit juice for normal people can be deemed as food. For a diabetic, it is profoundly disturbing, bordering on the toxic. And for a person who is fasting several days, it can be life-saving medicine. So day in and day out, we go around eating pretty much the same things. Hopefully, most of the time it is working as food, but many times it can be working as medicine, quite a number of times it can be working as poison also. So we need to look into this one important. Also the fact that from the wide variety of so-called food sources that earlier people were consuming, modern human beings have created a plenty but shrunk the number dramatically. So worldwide we find about 6 or 8 food groups that are dominating every table of every people on earth. Wheat, rice, potato, eggs, milk, poultry products, etc. So the variety has shrunk, and that is another issue. We need to address that. So be that as it may, now we have set up a base that this is what food is. In order to make the future exploration a little clear, let me use this opportunity to go a little bit into plants and how they produce food. Animals like us, we can't produce food, only plants can. They have got this green chlorophyll. This chlorophyll is a molecule that can capture the solar photons, energy from the sun. And it uses this energy to break the water molecule. Water is drawn from the soil. So H2O is broken. Oxygen is allowed to go by day process. Hydrogen is taken along with the carbon dioxide absorbed from the air. And the plant proceeds to produce the mother molecule of all energy on earth, that is glucose. Glucose is a 6-carbon molecule. It doesn't stop here. Plants clump glucose together to produce further sugars, simple sugars, complex sugars, simple carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, and carbohydrates which we cannot digest also. That's also part of the sequence. It will make a small side change and bring in a NH2 or amine group with nitrogen, produce an amino acid, and go on to produce a number of different amino acids, combine them together to produce a series of proteins. Another small molecular change from glucose will bring it to make a fatty acid. Thus several different fatty acids are produced. They are merged with glycerol and the plant produces many fats. It also produces a variety of vitamins, and some of the minerals are a part of the matrix of materials that it has drawn from the earth. So this is how plants are operating. The whole process together can be represented as step-up process. And each level of the stepping up, capturing of the solar energy and vesting it into a molecular configuration. That is the food. Various nutrients are produced. Now there are two kinds of plants. One kind of plant starts with a 3-carbon molecule and builds the other 3. They are called C3 plants. I will revisit this point, just keep in mind. Another category of plants, they start with a 4-carbon molecule and they only have to build the other 2. They are called C4 plants. So this distinction I will revert to at a later stage. So this is the profile of what the plants are doing. Now I will draw 2 food circles. In science, we don't use the words vegetarian, non-vegetarian, primary and secondary. What is coming from the animals is secondary. What is coming directly from the plants is primary. At this point, of course, this is only representative and indicative. I am not going into the question of what to eat, what not to eat. So worldwide, people consume milk and milk products coming from an animal. They consume eggs. People consume fish, which is the body of an animal. People consume meat, which is also part of the body of certain animals. So that is the secondary food. The primary food I will cut into 4 quadrants. Most of what we eat, they are actually the seeds of grasses and of shrubs. So our wheat and rice, they are the seeds of grasses. Our dals and legumes, they are the seeds of shrubs. So agriculture was born when we learned to cultivate it, allow the plant to grow to maturity, harvest the seeds and dry them out in the sun. This has enabled storage and transportation and changed the face of human life on earth. And when we have these sun-cured seeds, this important point that we realize is we can't eat them as they are. We can't eat raw rice, raw wheat and raw dal. We first have to cook it. The reason is the nutrition that this stuff contains is part of a matrix of an indigestible substance. So the nutrition in rice, wheat, dal, etc. is locked into a matrix of a substance that we are not able to digest. Hence we put it in water and boil it using heat, and this indigestible part rips open, and thus the nutrition will start becoming available to our system. So the seeds is 1 quadrant of the plant food. And because of this, the fact that we need to cook it, it is loaded with energy, it is high in calories, but the life processes have been paused by human intervention. So we say it is low in prana. And this cooking is actually a surrogate for a certain natural process that we are familiar. That is the process of germination, sprouting. When we soak a few of these seeds, drain the water and keep it, it will start to express a sprout. So the seed will start getting active. The enzymes in the seed will start opening the food source, which is then used by the DNA to start expressing a germ. Some of the calories are used up in this process, new nutrients are synthesized. So this quadrant has a better balance of calorie and prana. Continuing in its life cycle, it becomes a full-fledged plant, and many of these select plants we eat as green leafy vegetables, our sags. And this has the opposite characteristic. It has very few calories, but it is rich in critical nutrients. So we can say that this is low in calorie and high in prana. When the plants continue in their life cycle, they give rise to fruit. Fruits also have a balance of calorie and prana. They are alive in some sense, but they have a fair share of nutrients of every kind. And there is a distinction. If fruits have free sugar, we cut it at the table and call it fruit. If fruits don't have free sugar, we take it into the kitchen and call it as a vegetable. So the so-called vegetables are all technically speaking fruits without free sugars. That's the difference. Now if we look at the backdrop of the understanding that we have in nutrition, we require carbohydrates as energy sources in the order of several hundred grams per day. We require proteins for maintenance and enzymes of the order of several tens of grams per day. We require fats of the order of 10, 15, 20 grams per day. So whatever we require in the order of grams, we reckon them as macronutrients. Then we require vitamins, minerals, and certain things, typically of the order of milligrams to micrograms. These are classed as micronutrients. Now if we look at this picture, I will cut it into two segments. This is a wedge shape. And this part is heart shape. So this wedge shaped part, it is dominantly macronutrients, but it has a little bit of micronutrients. This heart shape is dominantly micronutrients with a bit of macronutrients. And an important difference is, in this wedge shape, cooking is mandatory. We can't digest this food without cooking. In the heart shape, cooking is optional. You have an option to cook or eat raw or semi-cooked. So this is an important difference which we need to harness in order to make it more helpful. My contention is simply this. Until growing age is complete, you are welcome to eat as much of this group as you want. But once growth is complete, you eat only as much of this as one to maintain healthy body weight, with the conjunction of exercise to maintain healthy muscle mass, and also to prevent additional weight gain, which is usually in the form of fat. So maintain stable healthy body weight, conserve muscle mass, not to put on fat. So this eating, quantitative, qualitative selection as matched with your lifestyle and sleep should ensure that stability. That is one. Beyond that, you are welcome to eat this part as much as you wish. And to concretize this principle, I'll take the next step. But this has some hidden things which are not normally talked about. At least I have not found anybody talking about. And these are extremely important things. We talk only about nutrients, but hidden behind this picture there is a small list of adversity. First and foremost, this has not been created by nature for our consumption. We are born, we can't produce our food, so we have to eat something. We have to go into nature, get it. Okay? So by empirically, by trial and error, we have learned to select and eat rice, wheat, and we don't eat datura seeds and poisonous mushrooms. So one part of it is all right. While what we eat, maybe 90%, 99%, 99.9% dominantly is the nutrition that we need and can handle. Somewhere on the margin, what we eat contains many substances that we don't need and cannot handle. They are the anti-nutrients. Can I overwrite or rub this off? Rub this off. It's a point of interest to realize, even at the phase of the hunter-gatherer or forager, whatever was eaten, herbs, berries, and occasional small meats were loaded with anti-nutrients. But at that point of time, the natural gut microbes that existed had evolved with the creature for such a long period of time with an excellent interface, so much so that they would modulate and moderate the effects of all these. And the end result was that creature had virtually no disease. And it is interesting to see a corollary even in contemporary life. So those individuals, even at the age of 100, 110, were physically fully active. Now, in contemporary life, look at the physical differences between an 18-year-old person and an 80-year-old person. It is huge. Then again, look at the difference in physical capacity between a young cat and an elderly cat. Not too different. Look at the physical differences between a young monkey and an elderly monkey. Not too different. Because they have remained in context of nature and their microbiomes, except for what we human beings have inflicted on them, they have remained the same. Whereas ours has gone for a toss. There is no way backward. We have to learn from this and move on. That is the only option we have. So as such, the first point that arises here is, given the fact that what we are eating has not been made by nature for our consumption, what we are eating contains many substances that can be classed as anti-nutrients. I'll just give one or two examples for your reference. Our food grains, whatever you take, the rice, dal, wheat, apart from its nutrition, they contain substances called phytates. These phytates can block the body from absorbing calcium, iron, and many minerals. They can be neutralized. Cooking is one of the ways to neutralize some phytate. You can further neutralize the phytates by adding some sour stuff like lemon or tamarind or gooseberries or tomatoes, which we normally do. But the point is, reality is very complex. Even the simplest things are riddled with complexity. And while on the one hand these phytates can prevent the body from absorbing minerals, we can't afford to neutralize them completely, 100%, because these phytates also feed some friendly microbes in our gut, which only consume this. So some amount of phytates are required to be taken unconverted also. Which is why we say all these things, even if they are linear and biphasic. Exercise, nutrition. It's good up to a point. Beyond a point, it ceases to be good and starts to become bad. Over-exercising, overeating. Under-eating is also the same. Under-exercising is also the same. So it's a question of finding an optimal point for all this. Similarly, our dals, the legumes, and many other vegetables also, they have a class of substances called hemagglutins. By the name itself, you can infer that it will promote the clotting of blood.
Please write it
Hemagglutinin. Okay. Hemoglobin. M, a single M. Fortunately, these can be neutralized by most conventional processing, cooking. The point is, cooking involves the use of heat with the addition of water or some other medium. We also often, for taste purposes, dry roast some of the nuts and other legumes, grams and all that. Dry roast without the addition of water. That will not completely eliminate the hemoglobins. Some of them still remain active. So such stuff should be eaten rarely and not in large quantities, particularly by people with clotting tendencies of any kind. If you put it in water and boil it or sprout it, hemoglobins are neutralized. But dry roasting will not, because no water has been added. So these are some points to keep in mind. Second is, human beings are the only creatures that have to cook their food. No other creature cooks its food. For us, it is mandatory, even the type of food that we eat. We don't have the option of eating raw. Still and all, cooking is a chemical process. Addition of heat and using of a medium like water or oil, as the case may be, invariably brings about chemical changes in what we are cooking. The laws of chemistry and physics don't change. So, cooking produces what are called thermogenic byproducts. Byproducts produced by heat. So elimination and maximization is nowhere possible. At every sequence we have to look for optimization. And here optimization is, for the mainstream of your cooked food, use the simplest cooking process, like boiling in water, sauteing or steaming. And always keep a more complex processed food peripheral and not central. Don't eat huge quantities of complexly processed food. And the second one is very important. It can put a burden on our habits. Actually, I am a very bad ambassador. I am a postman from the realms of science. While deeming to help you with your health, I will make your life immediately miserable, because we are doing so much wrong. And I can assure you, I myself am not able to follow 100% of my own science. I make a good endeavor to follow maybe about 85%. And that, in social circles, sets me out as a very peculiar creature. Nobody offers me anything.
Is writing have some religious effect on health?
No, some of the food we can eat raw. Vegetables, fruits, sprouts we can eat raw. But wheat and rice, all this, how can we eat raw? And we can't live only on that. So that is a real challenge. So this thermogenic byproducts, cooking once, it has to be accepted. We have to put up with it. But do not reheat cooked food. This is important. Eat it at room temperature. Morning leftovers you can eat in the evening if it is not spoiled. Eat it at room temperature, but don't cook it. Please excuse me. To extend the shelf life, it is okay to store it in the fridge, but put it out of the fridge 2-3 hours before you eat, so that it naturally comes to room temperature and you don't have to heat it. This is one. Another is
What is the harm in reheating?
reheating will form a second order of thermogenic byproducts, which is extremely adverse to the body. First cooking itself has done, but that we have to accept. Some nutrient loss will also be there, that we have to accept. The second heating takes it into an unacceptable level. For similar reasons, you can use a gas stove, charcoal chula, firewood, induction stove top is okay. But don't use microwave ovens. They majorly damage food. The industry is not telling us the truth. Don't use microwave ovens even for first cooking. Second heating is now out of the question. Please follow this because I do follow this myself. Microwave use is rampant in the USA and in India, but we have a lot of European alumni. They don't touch anything if it is cooked in microwave. They will prefer to go without food also.
What is the harm? The microwave?
Our domestic current is 220 volts and 50 hertz, which means the current reverses direction 50 times in a second. And the microwave oven is geared to this frequency, 50 hertz, and it cooks or heats by generating microwave radiation, which will change the electrical polarity of the food 50 times in a second. That is why it heats so rapidly. So all the unstable molecules are ripped apart, new bonds joined together to form God knows what molecules which never existed in the food. So that is an extreme expression of thermogenic byproducts. Normal cooking itself produces thermogenic byproducts that we have to accept, but this extreme expression we don't have to accept. We have an option not to use this gadget. As I said, it is going to eliminate a whole lot of convenience in our life. But these are scientific truths. No nutrition, I think, is talking about all this. And the third thing is, our primary food, which is carbohydrate, energy food, which is finally broken down into glucose by the digestive system. When glucose enters the bloodstream, it starts circulating. Whatever is required for immediate energy is taken for burning. Whatever is not required for immediate use is packed back again and deposited in the liver. And if liver becomes full, it is sent to the muscles for storage and so forth. So this buffer activity is going on. And the human body derives energy from the glucose by taking it in a controlled way and make it participate in what is called a enzyme-mediated reaction, in which step-by-step energy gets released for bodily use. And the organelle inside the cell, which brings about this energy release, you might remember from your school days the word mitochondrion, just the energy powerhouse of the cell. This mitochondrion is a very peculiar structure. It doesn't share our genes, it has its own genes. The hypothesis is it was a germ that lived outside the body sometime in the long past, which has migrated inside and is functioning as an endosymbiont. We eat food, digest it, allow it to use a little bit, it will help it unlock for us. But then it will not obey our signals because it has its own genes. So what the mitochondrion does is, if a cell requires energy, then it will be taken in for energy release. If a cell doesn't require energy, then mitochondrion will not cooperate, it will eject the glucose. And this glucose, which is not required for current energy, goes roaming around in the body, and when it is not required for energy, it will just behave like a chemical. Put a patch of its own self, that is, put a patch of glucose on every membrane it comes into contact with. You may know the word HbA1c. which is used as how much control of diabetes your body has got. That is just a measure of how much glucose patch has been put on the surface of the red blood corpuscle. And this glucose patch is happening not only on the red blood corpuscle, it's happening in every membrane of the body. And that is a part of the aging and degeneration process called glycosylation. So 3-step formula to keep glycosylation minimal is 1. Whether or not you are a diabetic, it's the same. Okay? Eat only required quantities of food, no more. Second is select foods that release their glucose slower into the bloodstream. I will talk more about this. That is glycemic index. Thirdly, do various types of activity which will stimulate the muscles to take up and use the glucose better. That is, in other words, physical exercise. So the combination of these 3 can keep glycosylation minimal. I will talk about the first step after covering this. The consequence of all these adverse things, because we have lost the natural microbes that could take care of all these things. Our present microbes are not able to do it. So the burden is on our body. And because of that burden, we are getting all these diseases, modern man's diseases. All this will cumulatively increase inflammation. The swelling that happens after an injury has a protective role. It can speed up the healing process. But there is another kind of inflammation that is invisible. You can't see it. But you test the blood for what are called inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, cytokines, interleukins. They are all elevated. And in modern medicine, inflammation is believed to be at the root of a whole lot of modern diseases, either as a cause or as a consequence. So either inflammation contributes to disease, or if there is a disease process going on, inflammation increases. So it's important to select and do things that will keep the inflammation in check. And the inflammation can be coming from any quadrant, including environmental toxins, mental stress, lack of sleep. All this can be inflammatory. And one of the most important prongs of inflammation coming into the body is our diet, because it's the food that we are actually eating. And last but not least, when the body utilizes even the legitimate nutrients like proteins, fats, etc., which have been produced by other creatures in a configuration they want, we want a different configuration. We will pull it down and reassemble it again. So some chemical debris is produced, and this chemical debris is active chemical compounds with a potential to damage at a membrane level. These are called oxidative stress. Arising from glucose products, carbohydrate products, or nitrosative stress arising from protein breakdown. We have to find ways and means of mitigating this and bringing this to optimal. It is interesting to see Vyayamasana practice is anti-inflammatory. So there are not only eating things, businessmen will jump into the bandwagon and sell antioxidants. My take is, don't buy and consume any of these antioxidants, they are next to worthless. Eat only natural food for your antioxidants. Don't buy these supplements. Okay, that's one. And the process of reducing adversities doesn't necessarily imply consuming a substance. There are also many things that we can do to achieve the same target. Like I said, inflammation can be reduced by regular asana practice and consuming Indian spices. They are all anti-inflammatory. You can add European spices also. Indian spices are largely seed-based, whereas European spices are herb-based. We borrow a lot of things from the West, usually the wrong ones. Why not borrow the right ones? We can use that is inflammatory, and it has some potentially antioxidative properties as well. And for antioxidative properties, the heart-shaped group of food, sprouts, greens, and fruits and vegetables. Consume some portions raw as salad and consume a portion lightly cooked. That's why you get the best of both worlds. And this group has a lot of antioxidant effect. Secondly, pranayama practice enhances the antioxidant status of the blood. Pranayama practice. So that's a good thing to add here, in addition to increasing your spices. Unfortunately, most forms of cooking along together with the spices, because the salt jar is also typically kept on the same shelf. I forgot to mention, in the food circles that we made, there were some characteristic omissions. Some things were not represented. Salt was not represented because it is not food, it's a mineral that is coming from seawater. Water is also not represented because that is another mineral that we get from the earth. And our carbohydrates have a hidden water. The picture did not represent coffee or tea, which technically have to be considered as drugs, not as food. By extension, pardon me? Yes, it can be. It can be. This opens up a discussion actually. Tea is a leaf and coffee is a bean. Therefore, it can be on the top quadrant or in the bottom quadrant. But if you inquire into the processes of nature, the coffee bean produces caffeine as a toxic alkaloid to ward off pests, which human beings in our perversion have drawn and adopted as a stimulant. That is the basic biological fact. Ditto with tea. It produces tannins and a small bit of caffeine in order to keep up the pests. And we are so much.
We are also pests.
So that is the fact.
We have addicted ourselves to it.
So tea as a leaf is not the same as palak.
What about tobacco as a leaf?
Same. So, like I said, at this point I am not saying you should have or should not have toxin, nicotine. Nicotine is a very powerful alkaloid. In fact, in Agatha Christie novels, most of the murders are conducted with a dabbing of nicotine injection. So be that as it may, they are basically toxins. That is why I have not represented them on the picture. For the same reasons.
What are the what are the anti-inflammatory seeds and spices, both Indian and European, for example?
What I said was, all the Indian spices are anti-inflammatory. Welcome to use more of it. In addition, you can bring in the European spices also, which are herb-based, which are also anti-inflammatory. And my point was, when we increase the intake of spices, we tend to increase the intake of salt to match it. This is a problem. Salt does not belong to the same category. In fact, according to WHO, 8 million deaths a year worldwide are happening simply because of increased salt intake. So, condition your tongue to accept more spice with less salt. That is my case. These are hard things to do but achievable. After all, it's a matter of conditioning.
Dr. Deshmukh can find out if somebody is suffering from inflammation by some kind of test.
Yeah.
There are tests.
C-reactive protein tests.
So many known, and God knows hundreds of them unknown
Cytokines.
also.
What is
C-reactive proteins, certain kinds of cytokines, interleukins with certain numbers. So depending upon the clinical presentation, if somebody is presenting with a disease, if needed, those tests can be done. But normally in medical protocol, testing is done only if it can change the diagnosis or the treatment. If a patient comes to me, without testing I am able to treat it, testing is redundant, we don't do it. But if I have a doubt that the testing this will change the course of my treatment, then I will do it. That is the context. And these are expensive tests. So the adverse aspects of nutrition are hidden behind the picture, and we need to wake up and do a little correction on that count. As far as nitrosative stress is concerned, again, the prescriptions are reasonably simple. The body has no mechanism for storing protein. So surplus protein for anybody is meaningless. This is one point. And proteins have to have a certain quality in the sense it is composed of 20 amino acids. Human body can make many of them, but the rest of them have to be eaten. And if we are eating the necessary amino acids in sufficient quantities, that we call biologically balanced protein. So good quality, adequate quantity. If you are taking more than what you require, the body cannot store protein. It will either burn it for energy or convert it into fat and store it, both of which will add to the nitrosativity. Also, if your protein is not of good quality, if it is inadequate and lacking in one or more of the amino acids, it will wait for a day or two. So within the week, if you are not eating the lacking amino acids, your body is not able to use it as a protein. Once again, it will convert it into energy and burn it, or convert it into fat and store it, which adds to the nitrosativity. So good quality, just adequate quantity of protein. Empirically, we don't have to go by balance measure. Like in a physical laboratory, we use milligrams of weight to find the correct. No, not like that. So if your requirement is, let us say, 60 to 70 range, it is not too bad to be eating 50 or 90 or 95. That's it. So it's a broad range, and nature can buffer using its reserve. And one very important, these are actually first year MBBS physiology points, but our education is structured so that as we advance and become specialists, we promptly forget the basics. Two important basics here. One is, normally the body uses carbohydrates for energy and proteins for build-up and repair. But when we have a lot of continuing mental stress, the body's cortisol level will be high. And in that scenario, the body will convert carbohydrates into fat and store it and burn the proteins. So this adverse reversal will be happening if mental stress remains unconverted. That is why we have scenarios of even healthy eating somewhere we are losing muscles and putting on fat and all that is happening, which is a case for managing stress adequately. The second point is the glucose that we eat temporarily stored, and when the muscle wants energy, immediate energy, even without oxygen, it can break the glucose into lactic acid and water and get the energy. And now this lactic acid will have turned the blood a little acidic. The body wants to eliminate it and usually succeed in eliminating it. But if sufficient oxygen is forthcoming to the system, then 80% of this lactic acid can be converted back into glycogen, glucose, and stored for future use. So potentially, the body has the capacity to recycle 4/5 of its food, primary food, provided sufficient oxygen is forthcoming. For us to get this oxygen in, one is pranayama practice, the outer part, and to get the oxygen deep down into the cells, circulatory activation in the form of exercise. These two have to synthesize, which is why I emphasize those 2 points, exercise and pranayama. So a whole lot of this adverse picture in the nutrition can be optimally balanced and corrected by proactive intervention using this understanding. And now I'll just quickly complete the picture. Indicative food pyramid. I'll keep it simple. This is not prescriptive, but it's a good beginning point. You can get about 40% of your requirements through whole grain, cereal, or millets. I'll go a little into this shortly. Approximately 30% to be got from vegetables and fruits. This is not dense, it is voluminous. So if you mean to get 30% of a typical platter, 1/2 has to be fruits and vegetables, 1/2 everything else. Only then you end up getting something like 30% of this. About 15 to 20% legumes, 2-headed seeds, dals and nuts, duly processed of course. This is a very important segment for vegetarians and even for people who take animal food. Still it is a significantly important thing, which will leave about 10 to 15% for secondary foods that is coming from animals, milk, eggs, meat, eggs. I'm not talking about drinking milk, I modify that. So this is an indicative picture. This can be roughly taken and adapted with your own fine tuning for anybody from the age of 25 to 75. This is a workable thing. If you want to extrapolate it to somebody very young or very old, I suggest I'll mark this as A, B, C and D. 4 equal triangles to start with. So a young person can afford to eat equal quantities of all the 4 groups. But once we are, let us say, beyond 70, 75 or whatever, just go on enlarging the middle triangle at the expense of the other. More vegetables and fruits and less of everything else.
That's what we call in India fasting, basically.
Same, yes.
Fruits and vegetables.
Mostly fruits and vegetables. So over a span of time, if you total it up, this is how it has re-emerged. So less and less of every other group. But this is important, nutritionally important. You can't eliminate it. It's a question of optimization. So this is one point. Now I come to this very important thing, distinction between millets and cereals. It's a happy thing that the Union Government of India is actively promoting millets. 2 things. I mentioned C4 and C3 plants, those that make glucose starting from 4 carbon atom and starting from 3 carbon atom. Now, rice and wheat, they are C3 plants. They start with a 3 carbon molecule and build the other 3 in order to make their glucose. They are water intensive crops. They consume a lot of water. So already the earth is under water strain. Secondly, the end product, their grain, has a similar nutritional profile as millets. The point is, it is very low in fiber and very low in minerals, calcium and iron, etc. Minerals are high in fiber, and they have much higher calcium, iron and other minerals. So this is one decided advantage. They are water saving for the environment. And as far as the body is concerned, they have more fiber, they have more calcium and iron. Now what is the role of fiber here? This is very important. What we have been able to find about the human gut microbes is, invariably, all the unfriendly microbes use sugars, including jaggery. Refined flours and white rice will feed the unfriendly microbes. Friendly microbes, all of them, they live by breaking down fiber that we cannot digest. So this fiber is of many kinds. Certain fiber is tactile, that you can feel with your tongue and teeth, fibrous foods. That is one type of fiber, insoluble. There is also a soluble type of fiber. There are many sugars which are not sweet, which we cannot digest, but the gut microbes can break it and they help themselves and they help us also some. So it's important to eat those. And in between, certain slimy substances, for example, that present in bhindi and oats to some extent, they are called beta-glycans. That is another type of important fiber. So your intake of fiber should span across the varieties. Quantity is not so much important as variety. And this is important because we now know 60% of our digestion is done by our enzymes. 40% of our digestion is done by the gut microbes. That's one. Secondly, our digestive enzymes are fixed. Either they can do it or they can't do it. There can be no change. But the microbes in our gut, if they see some food coming regularly, within a short period of time they can go and generate an enzyme to deal with it. They are flexible. So this is an important characteristic of the microbiome that we have to tap into and harness. Introduce fiber into your diet in progressively building up quantities. So initially if you start millet abruptly, you may feel bloating, constipation, whatever. If your body doesn't receive it, introduce it slowly and day by day start building it up until you are eating a full meal of the same thing. Dals and vegetables and everything else can be the same. This is one good way to go about it, because when these microbes break down the fiber, they produce as byproducts acetates, butyrates, propionates, which have a modifying effect on the immune system. So they cut out the adverse spikes, lower the inflammation, prevent cancer formations. Huge lot of beneficial effect. And a lot of disease is happening because we are not tapped into using this. Eating more fiber, you can never go wrong, except initially it can cause distress if you are not used to it. And eating sugars, direct sugars in any kind, is adverse. It's not so much because of the sugar, because it feeds the unfriendly microbes in your gut. Now a small question may arise, where do the unfriendly microbes get in? They come in by accident. The friendly microbes are in a state of mutual interdependence. They help us, we help them. So they are confident that we will feed them. But if we don't eat fiber, we end up starving them. That creates a consequence cascade. The unfriendly microbes, we don't have to feed them because they do nothing for us. And the urge to continue living is the most powerful expression in the universe. No creature will accept that if life is possible. Only when death is inevitable, it is accepted by other creatures, but man still fights. That's another thing. And if unfriendly microbes have got in, they are intuitively aware. There is a cellular intelligence actually in life forms. Our cerebral intelligence is a consequence of the cellular intelligence. So this is more fundamental and deep. For one, if left to itself, the body will find its most helpful expression. But every time the mind generates a thought, it sends a disturbing signal. This is one of the things. So an unfriendly microbe which has gotten is kind of aware that we are not going to feed it. You know what these bugs can do? They can generate molecules which hijack our nervous system and force us to eat what they want. So once the adverse microbes get in, they are able to hijack our nervous system and modify
Therefore, the sugar addiction,
junk food addiction. And also if we are accustomed to eating gooey food, suddenly you switch to my fiber. It sounds not palatable. At the end of the meal, you will not be satisfied. Part of it is your brain, part of it is my gut microbe. So it has sensed that its food is not forthcoming. It has an existential threat. So experimentally, there is a lot of level-on evidence. It is established that many of these microbes can create substances which can alter the behavior of the host by producing molecules which work through the nerves in the digestive system and modify the brain. This is a very, very
so intelligent.
prana, life. So basically the cellular intelligence operating. It is mind-boggling actually.
So here's the idea that the whole system of food habits is driven by taste. Now everybody has a peculiar taste as far as food is concerned.
Yes, sir.
Now is it the idea that the human body for a healthy existence has to struggle against the fight of taste?
It has to do that because we have come into this error from our evolutionary past. There was a period of time because we can see the animals in nature, they only eat the food that is good for their body.
Want a little more explanation to my question. We see animals. Animals have a uniform sort of behavior with respect to their food habits. Some animals hunt and some animals have some other sources of food. They remain constantly the same. Yet the animals are healthy. Why is it not true of us?
The animals are healthy for two reasons. One is the gut microbes that they have evolved with are still continuing. Whereas we human beings, without being aware, at a point in history very long ago, when we switched from being hunter-gatherers, consuming herbs, berries and occasional small meats, that was when the gut microbes were beautifully blended with the system. When we brought in agriculture, we started using cooked grains, dairy products, poultry and other meats. And that was when our gut microbiome went for a toss. And what is good and what is pleasant became two different things for us. So now we have an option. I can suffer by eating only healthy food. My body will be happy. I can suffer by eating tasty food. My mind will enjoy, but my body will suffer. So this is a situation, unenviable situation of modern human beings and not our doing. It is arising from an evolutionary accident.
Some new research disclosed that sugar which is contained in fruits is not harmful for diabetic people.
Correct, I agree. Diabetics can and should eat fruits, no problem.
Now, present scenario, there is a concept from the intermittent fasting. But according to doctors, we should have something after every 2 hours. a short.
I don't agree with this eating every 2 hours. No, let me complete. I got the question, and the answer is for 95% of urban human beings who are in reasonable health, including some ailments, intermittent fasting works and is beneficial. So you always try it out. Intermittent fasting simply means whatever you eat in a day, you eat it within a 7 to 9 hour window. That's all. I don't buy this eating every 2 hours, not even for diabetics. It's completely wrong. And I am prepared to talk to any medical professional who advocates this every 2 hours eating. That won't do you
Even for
good.
people with GERD.
It's not good for anybody. Treat the GERD. Don't support it by putting food in intermittent cascades.
And ulcerative colitis.
What usually happens is, if I am a medical gastroenterologist, you come to me with stomach burning, I say eat every 2 hours. I have solved my problem and taken my fees. All that you are eating will clog up your arteries. That goes to the cardiologist. Nothing to do with me anymore. We can't do that kind of practice. We have to help the person.
I remodel my question. Fight against the taste so as to maintain health of a human body. Is by itself a state of stress.
Yes, that's what I said. On the face of it, we have a
On
challenge.
the face of it, this challenge by itself causes a stress. The moment you project the thought that, well, taste is to be compromised, which the human body is used to, whether for one reason or the other. Because the moment you allow the market system grow, it is based on taste system. The whole market is driven by nothing but taste. That's a very strong fight. And that is how the taste is promoted. Now, on the one hand, market promotes the taste. But psychology tells us to fight against the taste developed by the market. This by itself gives rise to a challenge of stress. This by itself is a stress.
Absolutely, I agree. This is a stress until I have conquered it. After I have conquered it, if I learn to like the healthy foods, I have successfully conquered it and the stress doesn't persist. Or the other way out of stress is I will yield, enjoy tasty foods, and I will deal with whatever diseases it will bring into my body. So any position can be viable, tenable. Depends upon the individual. Can take any position. Final point is we have to suffer in some way. We have to suffer either by eating healthy food, or we eat what we like and suffer from disease. So we can choose which one we want. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for. We have had the benefit of recording of your today's.
I am very glad. I am very glad for
We
those who
preserve it in
plans.
our archive, and wherever needed, we will pass on the
Knowledge that you have
knowledge
gathered.
that we have gathered from you today. Thank you for sparing so much of time for us.
Thank you, sir.
Now it's open to question, open house question. Whatever question you want.
When we were talking about sleep, you said that 9 hours of sleep is 7 to 9 hours.
No, I didn't get it, please.
Mike, you can say that. Mike.
So when we were talking about sleep patterns, you were saying 5 to 9 hours of sleep is required by the body.
No, I said
7 to 9.
7 to 9.
7 to 9, right.
You want
So
to answer
what if a person is trying to sleep but is not able to sleep? Like he sleep at night, but somehow at certain time, after certain 5 or 7 hours, 6
I got
hours,
the question.
he wake up. So how do you control that?
आप अलग चल गया ये लीजिए
Potential reasons for not being able to complete a healthful night's sleep. One is mobile towers in the vicinity. Number two, mobile phone with the data and the Wi-Fi on, which happens to be within 3 meters of your head. Point number three, your dietary habits which are lacking in nutrients, because the body has only one language, hunger. There is no differential hunger. Whether it wants carbohydrate, protein or fat, it will trigger hunger. So in response to hunger, if we just eat what is available, we may end up not eventually fulfilling the body's requirements. So this hidden hunger that exists can interfere with sleep. This is one of the possibilities. Thirdly, if you are in any kind of stress, subliminally also, not necessarily conscious, stress can be deeper. If it is there, then that can also be one of the reasons. And a very common modern reason is, these are sad facts, very sad, and I know the questions very well, but I am afraid I don't have any answers. One is, our food is actually hollow food. It is devoid of nutrition because of the type of agriculture that we have been practicing in the last 50-60 years. The minerals are all drained away. And we are just feeding our land potash and urea and whatnot, a handful of chemicals, and getting our Sona Masuri rice, ultra refined grains and so forth. We have stopped eating coarse grains. So as a consequence, you see this cholesterol problem across the world, they are attributing it to butter, ghee, whatnot. Believe you me, 80 to 90% of the problem is because the worldwide soil copper is lost. Our food doesn't have enough copper, and it is not good enough to drink water in a copper vessel. This elemental copper is inorganic. The body cannot recognize it. So all these minerals are first fixated by the soil microbes, delivered into an organic matrix which is taken further by the plant. So lack of copper is one reason for this cholesterol surge. Similarly, the epidemic of sleeplessness, mobile phone, the other things, calcium and magnesium. I have a simple solution for this. You take equal quantities of white teal and jeera, roast them separately, powder them. Okay, so if you have had 500 grams of jeera, 500 grams of white teal, roast and powder, you add about good quality organic gold, jaggery, just about 100 grams. Take 2 spoons of this mixture in any form every day. That will take care of 100% of your calcium requirements. It will give you 65% of your magnesium, and it will give you about 45% of your zinc also.
जीरा और थोड़ा सा गुड़, 500 ग्राम सफेद तिल, 500 ग्राम जीरा, 100 ग्राम गुड़.
So just try this and make sure that you are eating some citrus fruit every day.
There is some time for to take this.
No, any time you can take. It just has to get into your stomach. In any form, you mix it with rice or swallow it with water, no problem. So just to make sure that you are eating citrus fruits on a regular basis.
हाँ ये कैसे ओपन तो करना चाहिए.
Just to do with speaking about that certain metabolic processes take place during night, during certain hours. What is the science?
The science is body is at rest. Okay?
सारा नहीं जाओ सुनते रहो.
And conscious part of the brain is shut off. And its body utilizes this phase to overactivate certain other deeper brain areas. And these deeper brain areas take over the process of recovery and healing, acting through the appropriate hormonal networks. That is how it works. So body is at rest. Certain areas of the brain become overactive, but not the conscious part.
Then which hour of the night we shouldn't miss, we should not skip the sleep?
Actually, the entire sequence. Sleep architecture depends upon 7 to 9 hours of sleep, depending upon your body weight. If you are lighter, you need less sleep. If you are eating more fruits and vegetables, you need less sleep. If you are eating more sweets and fried food, you need more sleep. So it's like that. So the cursor fluctuates depending upon your habits also. It's a variable over which you have some control but not complete control. And ideally, you must be asleep 2 hours before midnight. You must be in bed and asleep for healthful sleep architecture to start. And the process of waking, if it naturally happens towards, let us say, 4 or 5, that represents healthful sleep architecture.
What should be the frequency of meals a day?
You can opt between 3-meal formula or a 2-meal formula. For most elderly people after 50, 60, 2-meal formula works very well. One full meal, that is brunch. Had it, let us say, the earliest possible, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11. Ideally before noon. Because once the clock crosses noon, body metabolism shifts over. If you are eating the first meal at 1:30, the body will have a problem with that. So, any time before 11:30 is a good time to eat the first meal of the day. Go on drinking water in small quantities through the day. Afternoon, you have a platter of fresh fruits. Eat as much as you like, even if you are a diabetic, eat. And then towards the evening, have another complete meal. And the whole window, if it is less than 7 to 9 hours, it is called intermittent fasting. And if no
How
food is...
late this third meal should be? Or how early?
Before 7 o'clock is recommended.
Third meal.
Second meal.
Third?
Third also 7
fruit
o'clock.
platter, no?
No, fruit platter is the third meal.
First and second meal is fruit.
हाँ, first जो है वो मॉर्निंग में आप पूरा खाना खाइए और शाम को पूरा खाना खाइए और बीच में फल खा लीजिए.
After 7, no meal.
After 7, nothing. Only water.
जैनी बन जाइए.
अरे हम कर रहे हैं और हमको फायदा है और दिखता है.
When I am touring, everything is fluctuating. But when I am in Bangalore for the last 30 years, I eat before 6 o'clock, maximum 7. I never eat at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock.
Where most of the 90% take after 9.
Huh?
90% take after 9. Second
That's a
meal.
problem,
That
yes.
is the problem.
Part of it is social reasons, part conditioning, part habit. partly
Children
inertia.
are now driven towards a kind of
नॉक्टर्नल ईटिंग.
Yeah.
दे लिव नॉक्टर्नली. बेसिकली दे और सब निशाचर हो गए. 12 बजे उनको भूख लगेगी.
This brings me to a point, madam. What I think is, this mobile phone screen, you have control until you open the screen. Once you open the screen, the apps and the programs, the heuristics are so designed that it is literally a tunnel which will draw you in. No human is immune to this. And this is not an accident. It's designed by some of the technologically savvy people on earth. And the heuristics are such designed that a man or a woman or a child is led into this tunnel from where you become the product, because the whole tunnel is free. They are ending up selling you products, they are ending up using your purchasing power to take your money, to sell you so many things which will leave you with afflictions, diseases and ailments, and the rest of your money goes into this healthcare pharmaceutical huge complex. This is my take. This is also why I am doing what I am doing. I seriously believe in this. It's not an accident.
well planned mechanism.
There is somebody profiting by human distress somewhere.
That is what I challenge is that.
So at an individual initiative, what can we do?
Market is selling stress.
So just think, sir, next generation, we at least had another childhood playing with the earth and playing with gilli danda, whatever. But now see, poor children, they are brought into this exceedingly complicated world and they cannot navigate. And the signaling is all hedonistic. What is pleasant is the arch point. What is good, we don't know. To accept what is good, we'll have to put up with unpleasantness or discipline ourselves. It is not easy.
Most of the children are not addicted of mobile.
Anyway, and
The way we can kill stress is through a mechanism of conquering taste, is one thought as per the food suggestion. As per the suggestions regarding diet. Other natural mechanism within our body is that if we subject the human body to some exercises, it sweats. So this process of going for exercises, morning walks, playing hobbies, etc. This is the second. Third is entering into a kind of static hobby like singing, like reading, intellectual thinking. The third is likewise, these are broadly certain features of human body which it is regularly subjected to. We eat food, instant reaction is go for sleep. Next is, after you feel a little bit relief, you move out, go for an exercise. Third is, you feel a little bit rejuvenated, go for a hobby. The third is, you sit in your library, read something. So is apart from maintaining control over the diet, do these habits also act as a catalytic agent sort of for meeting the stress part?
of course they will.
Intellectual thinking, like singing, hobbies like singing, hobbies like playing on chess, hobbies like all these sports. Do they add anything to that?
They had a huge value. In the initial part of my talk,
क्या आप दिन भर स्नैकिंग नहीं करते थे ना इस वजह से?
हफ्ते 10 दिन के लिए गए घर तो 7 बजे भूख लग गया और 7 बजे खाना वाना खा के फिर गाँव में विलेज इन द विलेज 7 o'clock sunset food people used to take their dinner.
yes sir, all this do add value. I had made a mention about this in the earlier part of my talk. Physical exercise, music, intellectual digressions.
You don't have
They
any,
are part of cognitive
sir, you don't have any
structuring strategies.
book, any publication, any material, any
I have not produced anything. Only my talks and recordings are there.
nothing there in writing.
The reason I don't write is updating. 6 months later I may not be saying the same thing. New scientific research
Then again
comes.
change something.
It has to change.
आज का लंच तो हो जाए, फिर कल का सोचा जाएगा।
ये क्या?
11 बजे तक
बटर
lunch दिया
हाँ,
गया। गोल
तो इसका मतलब हम लोग 9 बजे आ जाए, नाश्ता ही
हाँ नाश्ता गोल करके आएंगे
लंच यहाँ पे करके तब सब लोग बैठेंगे।
फिर शिकायत लगी थी सारी लोगों को
नहीं, नींद नहीं आती है, एक्चुअली नहीं आती है। हम पूरा खाना खा के आते हैं, उसको नींद नहीं आती। जब आप दोपहर में खाना